25 years ago. My days of wearing ties are kind of over. Those early days when, as a pastor, I had to wear ties. Now it's kind of fun. It took me a little while to remember how to tie it this morning. So the topic today is the path of self-mastery, which is a fascinating thing, and I was so glad that Reverend Kathy invited me, excuse me, to speak to this topic. Self-mastery, for the last 40 years I've been looking at this in one way or another, and it's quite a mystery, actually. So I think we should start with definitions. What is the self that we're mastering? And actually that way of saying it is a little, it leads us in the wrong direction to this idea that we're going to master the self. I'd like to suggest that there's something else going on here with self-mastery. And to that end, I brought some visual aids. When I was in homiletics in my Master's of Divinity, they taught me when you preach, you want to bring visual aids. So these are my visual aids. This is my beloved glove. And I just brought, I didn't bring the matching pair, but I want you just to get a feel for that. This is fleece. It's insulated fleece. And I break it out this time of year because when I get in the car in the morning, my hands are cold. Anybody relate to this? And so now I have my gloves on and I can drive to work. Well, now I find out my sister just bought a new car and it has a heated steering wheel. Have you heard about these things? A heated steering wheel. How many of you have heated steering wheels? God bless you. It's just quite an amazing thing. So one of these days I'll be able to get a car with heated steering wheels. Until then I have insulated fleece gloves. Now a glove is a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful invention. You put your hand in it and now you can do all kinds of things. This particular one keeps my hand warm. I have others here just so that you know. It's a very exciting moment to share all my visual aids. This, do you recognize this? Oh yes, they say. All of you have about the same price range, I see, when you go into Lowe's to pick up the one you're going to rake and so forth. So this is an interesting glove. It's kind of like some kind of stretchy wool that they dip in some kind of rubber compound. And now this is rough and protective, and you're not going to get, your hands all hurt when you do rake your leaves and pick up your stuff. So this is a really nice glove, and I just got this. It's rather clean, and haven't done a lot of work with that. Now is my favorite glove. This one has a thermoplastic rubber coating. It's just even fun to say it. A thermoplastic rubber coating. Do you see this glove? I know. I feel like Batman when I'm wearing it. And it's very flexible and very protective, and it's got a great grip. And it was very, very dirty. I had to wash it last night, which is indicative of how much yard work I do. It gets very, very dirty, how much projects in the yard I do. If my wife were here, she would be cackling uncontrollably at that idea that I do so much. So the glove is great, and it's a wonderful metaphor, and it's going to help us to understand what it is really self-mastery is. When you've got the glove on, I'll just put this on again, this Batman glove. So it looks very much like the glove is moving, doesn't it? And the glove is moving, but is the glove moving itself? No. So what's moving the glove? I am. The hand within the glove is moving the glove, isn't it? Now, from the outside perspective, though, it just looks like the glove is holding the rake, or the glove is picking up the leaves, or the glove is, doing whatever we're having the glove do. But actually, it's the hand within doing all the work, isn't it? This gives us a hint about self-mastery. The glove is the body mind, right? Our conditioning, the personality named Scott, that's the glove. And it's an important thing, and it's an expression of divine consciousness like everything else in creation. But the hand, that's something else entirely, right? That's the spirit within, right? That's the real self. So when we come to talk about self-mastery, we're not talking about the glove mastering the hand, are we? We're talking about the hand mastering the glove. right? Now, when I take this glove off, it doesn't do anything but just sit there. But actually, what's interesting about the human being is we have an ego, right? And what is an ego? An ego is, this is my definition of ego. The ego is the story that the glove tells about itself, not knowing anything about the hand, right? When the glove doesn't have any sense of the hand within it, it tells a story about itself, right? And that story we call the ego. And it's a story about a separate self and a story about a hungry self, a never satisfied self, a self that's full, typically, of shame and fear. And it's full of shame and fear, not because of the bad things that's happened to it. It's full of shame and fear exactly because it does not feel its connection to the hand. For 30 years, I've been exploring issues of shame and fear. It's kind of what I do for a living. And it started with my own exploration of it in my own personal therapy. I was a pastor, and I burned out terribly because I was trying to change the church so I could feel comfortable being there. And it turns out that doesn't go so well. So I got into my own personal therapy because I was burning out, and I was very troubled by that. And I went in to manage my own kind of, and I'd never really thought about feelings. I'd never thought, my dad was a pastor, and he was just always, son, we just always take everything to the Lord. And whereas, of course, that's absolutely true, the Lord manifests in the people that we interact with as well. And it was an amazing thing for me to go to therapy and talk to someone about some very real things. First time in my life, I was 28. And shame and fear were the first things I encountered in myself. They were just bubbling right here at the surface. The sense of not being good enough, and the anxiety that someone would find out who I was behind my mask, right? And the desire, the need, the craving for people's approval, and so forth. Many of you no longer have those kind of things in your life, I understand. For me, this was a real revelation, and I discovered that as I studied this over the course of the decades, that it turns out shame and fear was not because of my mother, as I had originally thought and claimed. It turns out shame and fear originates at that moment when I forget my connection to the inner hand, which of course we do in this lifetime. There's many distractions, and we come into a body, and we come into these incredible senses, and we begin to feel into the world with our senses. And it's easy for us to forget the inner life because our attention is so compellingly drawn to the outer life. I mean, heated steering wheels. So it takes some time for us to learn to come back into connection to the inner hand, for the glove to come back into the connection with the inner hand. This is a very important thing. If the glove, can you imagine that if the glove wanted to open and the hand wanted to close, how that would be a problem? It would be very difficult to handle a rake if that was the case, right? If the glove and the hand were not in sync, if the glove had a mind of its own. Well, this body-mind does have a mind of its own, and it's called the ego. And it runs contrary often to the impulses of the spirit within. And so there is a process that spirit takes us through toward self-mastery. And that mastery is the mastery of the self over the personality and the body-mind. Right? We see this with the great masters who lived in perfect coherence and sync with divine spirit. I'd like to suggest to you that there's maybe a 5-step process in the process of self-mastery. I'll put my gloves away here. I'd like you to think, if you will, of life, divine life, as it manifests in all of creation, as being represented by the river, right? A wild river. And as rivers do, they have all kinds of different kinds of water. Sometimes it's very rapidy water, and sometimes it's very smooth water. Sometimes it's waterfalls. So I'd like you to think that the human being then is in different relationships to the river. Now, in the first stage, the human being is just thrashing in the river itself. It's being carried along by the river, but the human being, he or she doesn't really know how to swim much and is always feeling like at any moment he or she could drown. I'm not going to keep saying he or she, I'm just going to say he. Is that okay? Or maybe I'll mix it up. And so in the first stage, there's just a person in the river being swept along by the current. Now, this represents, I would hazard a guess, most of humans on the planet at this point, kind of lost in the drama, you know? Lost in the drama created by the glove not knowing its connection to the hand. Can you check in with your own life or look at the world around you to see how, what kind of drama we create as human beings? It's just quite amazing, isn't it? It's almost as though we're addicted to drama. And I do think there's something about the drama that the ego uses toward its end. The ego doesn't want to look within, is afraid of looking within, and so uses the outer drama to keep attention focused without. Does that make sense? So at this first stage of just kind of being swept along, just lost in the drama, there is very little consciousness, there's very little awareness, there's just surviving day to day. And I think there are a lot of people on the planet in this stage. And stage 2 changes a little bit. In stage 2, the human being that's in the river of life being swept along bumps into a log and throws his arm over it. And that's stage 2. Now, at least there is an ally that the human has in the river of life. The human being still is not very conscious, but it at least has an arm over a log, and it's not constantly dipping down, in fear of drowning. Now it's being swept along by the river, and it's still quite unconscious, but at least it has this log. And this represents the human being beginning to have some sense of awareness and consciousness. The heart just beginning to come online a little bit, some kind of growing sense of sensitivity. Still feeling utterly lost, but there is some kind of ripening to an inner yearning to grow and to evolve. That's stage 2. That's when people begin to be a little interested. They begin to look around for help. They begin to think there's got to be something more to life than just being swept along by this river in some meaningless, purposeless kind of way. And so stage 3 comes. And in stage 3, the person has moved from the arm over the log to their ability to climb up on top of the log. And so now they're riding the log down the river, right? And that's a wonderful progression. That's stage 3. And that represents when people begin to take in new information. They open themselves to truth, wherever they can find it, and they start processing a little bit. They start asking questions. They start watching maybe a little bit more meaningful TV. They will look for a good book to read. They'll hear something on YouTube and begin to check out podcasts. And there begins to be a felt sense of an inner hunger for truth in stage 3. Something is moving inside of them. They can't put their finger on it. They wouldn't know how to point to it, but they're beginning to get information about it. And so that's when people begin going to some classes. That's when people will show up in my office as a psychotherapist. That's when people will come to church and begin to take in new information, and they read and they listen, and their eyes are a little more open, and they begin to feel, for the first time perhaps, a sense of some optimism about life. That's stage 3. And there isn't really still any relationship they're aware of to the river. They're still happy to just be surviving, but at least they've got some sense of like they've got a hold on something. And that is the beginning sense of a hold on truth, the truth that sets us free. But that doesn't come to fruition until stage 4. Now in stage 4, this is where the person on the log has developed some skill in carving the log out and making it a kayak. Right? And now they're sitting in the log, made now into a kayak, and they have paddle, and now they're learning to relate to the river in a little bit different way. They can make choices about where they go. On the log, they have no choice. They just go wherever the log goes. But now they have some choices about where they go. And they can come this way, and some rapids come, and they can take this tack to it. And do you see? Now life becomes a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more of an adventure. They're still never at any point in charge of how the river flows. Right? They're never in control of how the river flows or how the water goes, but they can relate to it. They can collaborate with the river now, perhaps for the first time. Now, this stage 4, represents when a person begins to apply the truth that they're learning. And that changes everything, a personal application. It's not enough, do you understand, to sit in an audience and to hear a lesson. It's the application of the lesson to the life that makes the difference. Right? It's not enough to read a book. We all have lots of information in the head from books that we've read. I've got lots and lots of books in my head. And the book is very of little value until the principles and truths given in the book are applied in the life. Applied in one's personal life, applied in one's relationships, applied in one's relationship to life. That's where we begin to learn and grow. The sense of an inner movement begins to take place, where we feel perhaps drawn in one direction as opposed to another. We begin to sense the synchronicities of life, right? Consciousness begins to open up, the heart begins to open up, and we begin to feel like we're working with life, collaborating with life, rather than struggling against it. This is stage 4. It's a very, very important stage. You're all in this stage. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. But I want to emphasize, it's what happens in between Sundays. Right? So when I grew up, we were Seventh-day Adventists. I grew up in a Seventh-day Adventist church. I became a 4th generation Seventh-day Adventist preacher. That's a lot of Seventh-day Adventists, I'll tell you. And my grandfather, that was on my dad's side, and my grandfather on my mom's side was a Seventh-day Adventist preacher. I had cousins that were preachers. Wow. It's taken me a while. I have some recovering still to do from all of that. But we used to pretend, or laughingly say that some people were Seventh-day Adventists, meaning that they only paid attention to God on the seventh day. Right? Rather than, this not being a hobby, this growing our relationship to spirit within. But we can't, it doesn't work just to dabble in that. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's got to be something that takes over the life. It's got to be something that begins to inform everything we are and everything we do, and not just something we come on Sundays and sit and listen to a lesson and go, yeah, that was inspirational. And then we go right back to our everyday patterns. That's the early stages. Stage 3, sitting on the log, that is just going back to our everyday patterns. Stage 4, and the way that we carve out the lab is, or carve out the log into a kayak, is through daily practice and daily application of the truths that we're being exposed to. The truths that come not just from up front, right? Not just from what we read, but more importantly, the truths that begin to come from an internal place. Right? Now, I grew up, hearing that the Bible was the Word of God. And I don't want to step on any toes here, but I know that I'm just preaching to the choir here. I love, that's what I love being about, coming here and doing some of this. I grew up believing that the Bible was the Word of God, and I learned how to translate the Greek New Testament into Hebrew, and I learned how to do all that, and how to preach and all this kind of stuff. It was much later on in my life, in response to a great crisis of my life, a great dark night of the soul, that I learned that the true Word of God wasn't something that was printed on paper and bound in a book somewhere. The true and living Word of God was what was being spoken from within. And that we could listen to that right now. We could feel the movement of the inner hand, right? And begin to respond. And in stage 4, we begin to take that seriously, that attunement right? To the inner voice, that still small voice that comes from within. We can still appreciate, and I deeply appreciate all the world's scriptures as records of the living Word of God spoken through inspired beings. And those have made a great difference in my life and been tremendously beneficial. But to listen to that, the inspiration as it comes to you, you are an absolutely unique glove. And the hand within you, of course, is what you truly are. That's your true identity. And learning for the glove to learn to listen to the hand, for the glove to begin to yearn to have all of itself in alignment with and in congruence with the hand, is a completely different way of living, as many of you here know. That's stage 4, where life begins to be a dance with the river. We begin to feel in collaboration with the river rather than in competition with it, rather than feeling threatened by it. We see that it's an incredible gift to be on the river in this incredible ride of life. Well, there's another stage. And that 5th stage is where the consciousness of the kayaker and the consciousness of the river become one. And the kayaker no longer believes himself or herself to be separate from the river, but deeply feels themselves to be an expression of the river, a dance upon the surface of the river. Like the old classic metaphor of the wave rising up out of the ocean but never being separate from it, right? Being a unique expression of the ocean and then returning to the ocean. So the kayaker learns to experience himself or herself as an expression of the will, the life, the dance, the passion, the love of the river itself. And that's an entirely different experience. When the hand has become so real within the glove that the glove is a perfect expression of the hand, that's stage 5. And at that point, a sense of a separate self is just, has dissolved away. And there's a sense of being united with life, and that all beings are an expression of one's self. And that, in my opinion, I'm suggesting for your consideration, is true self-mastery. So I'd like to do a little meditation with you, because to speak about this is one thing, and to open to the experience that takes place within yourself is a completely different thing. So arrange yourself, if you would, for meditation, just by sitting up nice and straight, putting both feet on the ground. Now, let your breath become a little stiller and a little fuller. I'd like you to think for just a moment of your breath having 3 parts: belly, ribs, and chest. So let the belly expand as you inhale. Let it rise up into the ribs. Let the ribs kind of stretch out to the side. And then at the top of the inhalation, let the chest rise, like literally rise toward the heavens. And then exhale, and the chest drops, and the ribs contract, and the belly moves back in toward the spine. That's your exhalation. Inhale, belly, ribs, heart. And then exhale, heart, ribs, and belly. Slow, full, very conscious breath. Bring your attention to your root chakra or your pelvic floor. Have a sense that there is a root or energetic cord dropping down out of the root chakra into the earth, deeply into the earth's core. And another centering breathing practice I love because it clears the whole chakric or energetic system is I'd like you to take that nice full breath that you were working with just a moment ago and breathe it in through the crown of your head as though you were breathing in through the crown all the way down to the root, down at the perineum. And then as you exhale, you bring the energy back up to the heart center and breathe it out of your heart in all directions. Breathe in through the crown of the head and down to the root chakra. And then as you breathe out, bring the energy back up to the heart center and breathe out in all directions. Let the exhalation be slow, very conscious, radiating out, opening the heart center. Do this as a sacred practice, as though you are preparing the glove for the coming forth of the hand. Purifying, emptying the glove, making it open, receptive. Continue to breathe in this way, down from the crown chakra down to the root on the inhalation. And then on the exhalation, back up to the heart, and breathing it out in all directions. All right, and now I want you to feel that there is an open connection now from the heart center to the crown chakra, right at the crown of the head. Visualize the crown chakra, visualize the crown chakra as a closed lotus bud. Now it can be any bud, any favorite flower. Lotus is the classic visualization. And now with your intention, allow that lotus bud to open. In the yogic text, that lotus bud has 1,000 petals, 1,000 pure white petals. See those petals stretch up and lay back, all 1,000 of them. Feel the crown chakra to be utterly open and receptive. Crown chakra opens to the most profound spiritual dimension of divine grace and light and love and power. So now, as the crown chakra opens, visualize light beginning to pour down into the crown from divine presence, from divine consciousness. Brilliant, beautiful light pouring down through the crown and filling the head. Center your attention just in the head right now. And let that light fill up the head center. And begin to manifest as divine wisdom. Deep intuitive understanding of all the secrets of life. There in the head center, what begins to make itself known is the truth that sets us free, as Jesus said. See if you can feel yourself now intuitively connected to divine wisdom. Given to you, present within you, there in the head center. Now the light continues to pour in through the crown, down through the head, through the throat now, and into the whole chest, into the whole heart center, from shoulder to shoulder, from throat to the bottom of the sternum. Let the light just fill, become brilliant, as though the sun itself had taken up residence there. And here the light organizes as divine love and compassion for all beings. An utterly inclusive love, uncaused, without a particular object, love as a state of being. Love, which is the connective tissue of the universe, holding all seemingly separate things together into a unified whole. But that love now, that creates and manifests and dissolves all things, is now present in your chest. And the light continues to pour down through the crown chakra, through the head, throat, chest, and now down into the whole belly, abdominal area. And again, to fill this up with radiant, brilliant light. And here the light manifests as divine power, as divine will, as perfect alignment between the hand and the glove. The capacity to break free from old patterns, old karmic distractions, old ways of living that are not in sync with the hand, old belief systems that no longer serve us. The power here to break free from consensual consciousness, from our dependence upon the tribe to tell us what's real. A deep and growing sense of internal integrity and self-sovereignty. Feel power supported by or supporting the love and the wisdom. Power to be able to live from wisdom and love in the world, to be in the world but not of it. And feel these three centers now, all three lit up. Wisdom, love, and power. Feeling of divine consciousness in the glove of the body-mind, moving you into harmony, congruence, complete alignment. Wisdom revealing that you indeed are actually the hand. Love revealing that you are connected with all things. Power enabling you to live your soul's purpose in the world. All right, a nice deep breath. Feel the way that the body is being supported by the chair. Refer again to the root that's deeply implanted in the earth. And just make a promise to yourself, a commitment, a strongly held intention to leave here today, not forgetting the gifts that are now placed in these three centers. An intention to allow the hand to operate in and through you until there is no longer a sense of a separate self to make this intention. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. May we continue to grow into this, not just individually, to come together in ways that as communities, as we grow into this consciousness, we can make a difference in human consciousness, live our lives in service to those that are still thrashing in the river rather than one with it.